Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So here I want to compare a bunch of different weapons, including the new crystalline weapons that we can obtain as of Module 30. These come from the new dungeon, the Dread Sanctum. You can get the mythic version from the Master, and you can get legendary from advanced. They have a new set effect which can give you a boost to your power and your critical severity as a damage dealer, and then overall healing and awareness depending if you're a healer or tank. Ultimately, we need to see which weapon is best for damage dealers. We'll cover a few notes for tanks and healers later on in the video. But we have a lot of different weapon sets in the game, from now the return to the Pirate Skyhold, Mount Hope now, Wild Space, North Dark. So let's quickly cover the details. Now your first thought might be, these weapons only really give you stats. Why would I use them? Well, the new stat caps for damage dealers have gone up significantly. Power is now 120%. Same with combat advantage and crit severity. So you need 90% more stats with this module, which means getting more sources of those stats is very useful. I have made videos for both Rogue and Wizard maxing out all of those stats. And yes, if you want to be running with the good companion damage bonuses like Minsk, Batiri, Neverwinter Night, you generally need weapons that give you a boost to stats. But what are better? These, or maybe even still the perfect Loth weapons? Well, if we have a look at these Bismuth weapons, total up exactly what they're giving us, so 200 base damage boosts, then those stats, it's going to vary a little bit depending on the class. And then the set effect, that's going to give us maximum 3.5% power, and if we're a damage dealer, 5% crit severity. So that's a total of 8.5% stats, and if we do some rebalancing, we can see that that would be a gain of 11.04% damage. This is including the 6,800 item level from my base level. We're comparing it all versus a base level, so we can look at the damage gain compared to all these other weapon sets. We have the legendary crystal weapons, and there's actually this time around barely any difference. It's just 300 item level, which means these will give you like a damage gain of 10.42%. But if we jump back to the magma weapons here, we can see these can give like 10% stats, but the amount of base damage is only 175 and a bit less item level. So they would give like a 10.11% damage boost. Oh, and wait, there is the purple blood brass weapons you can get now within Pirate Skyhold. We can have a quick look at those. They're a little bit less effective than the mythic and legendary set, but still similar set bonus. But you can see they fall behind pretty heavily without any like base damage boost there. We then jump back to Wild Space. We have the +1 Solarum set. Can still be very good with a up to 5.5% damage boost depending on the HP difference of you and your enemy. So that's average half of that. And then damage dealers gain 3% damage boost, and the base damage here is 250. But this would just be a 9.52% overall, including the item level. And that legendary set, even less effective as it doesn't have any base damage boost. We can then look at Xeraxian and Void Touch, same set bonus there. It requires stacking up, and you can gain upwards of like 6% damage boost. We're mainly looking within the dungeon, the Dread Sanctum, because this is the new endgame content. But some weapons will perform a bit better, say if you're in Wild Space, and this bonus would be doubled. And back when that module launched, I did do some comparisons, and these ones are generally like the best in those boss fights in that content, because a 12% damage boost is pretty significant. But here in the Dread Sanctum, when we have to compare versus other weapons, we find Void Touched is only a 10.5%, with Xeraxian a bit less than 10%. Just the issue is you can't really use them in this dungeon, because other than the first boss, the second and last boss always have mobs. You've got your paranoid delusions, your tentacles, demogorgon aspects, so you would gain like no damage boost from them using them here. We can even look at the meteoric purple weapons you get through Wild Space campaign store. And yeah, these definitely I wouldn't use. And finally, the North Dark, we have those perfect weapons. They give a flat 3% boost to your overall damage and up to 5% crit strike and 5% crit severity after 20 seconds in combat. They also give a 250 base damage boost. What this means is they give some of the most amount of stats, 10%, with a 3% damage boost and a decent amount of item level plus good base damage. So these are 12.36%. If we quickly look at, say, the Durgar weapons, and ideally you would be then within a party where everybody's using these, so including the other DPS, and so we calculate for just 3 of them because your tanks and healers would most likely use these masterwork weapons if they're min-maxing for team support anyway, regardless what weapons that you're using. So we just look at the damage dealers, and that would only be like, yeah, a bit over 7% gain. Weaver, it's the same story. Unfortunately, it's not flagged as Underdark, this Dread Sanctum, so we can't actually make the full use of that weapon set. So it's like 8% effectiveness there. Again, you need your whole team to use them to give that boost to each other. And finally, Stormforged, still performing very good there with the 200 base damage boost and those damage effects. They just require good timing and nearly a 10% overall damage gain. Ultimately, this is the full comparison, and you can see the best performing set would be the perfect weapons. But that is, of course, using the stats they give you. Close behind that is indeed the Bismuth set, and if you don't need stats at all, well, you pretty much just gotta go with Celerum +1s because Void Justice and Araxian don't really work in those mixed boss fights of this new dungeon. Be aware with these weapons requiring stacking, they're not going to be great for multi-target damage, where you're just jumping in and out of combat. That's where you would run with, say, the Magma set. It doesn't require stacking at all, Stormforged or Celerum. But in most cases, I wouldn't bother prioritizing your damage output in multi-target unless you're such a tryhard. Even then, you shouldn't be losing too badly on the Pain Giver chart just because of a few mob groups. There's barely any, honestly, in this dungeon. These new Bismuth weapons can be viable to use if you want to look cool with a ton of item level, or you miss, say, the specific stats, power and crit severity. But honestly, I wouldn't use them, and I'm not really a fan of the visuals. And as we can see, the perfect weapons are gonna be the go-to. Additionally, they have a neat perk that if you die after stacking them up, you don't actually lose the stacks. You will keep them, which means you don't need to restack them up. You'll be still fully effective after you revive. And if you're wondering where Mirage weapons would rank on this, well, it's going to depend on your effectiveness. They can still be very good, and you'll find their performance to be around 10% on this level, but it will generally be very reliant on how good you are actually at the game. Like, the worse you are at actually playing, the better Mirage weapons are, but the better you are at playing, the less effective they are. So a quick few notes on tanks and healers. As we already mentioned, Durgar weapons are the best ones to go with to support that team. They have the most amount of item level, base damage boost, but there are alternatives like the Feywood ones and the Mastered ones before that. The same bonus to give 2% damage resistance, and outgoing healing to your team. But again, it's primarily for team support in the way of those little effects. A small step down from that would be then the Weaver weapons. But if you're just looking for personal gains, so if you just want to improve your tanking and you just want to improve your healing, the best by far is Zoraxian and Void Touched. Void Touch, of course, pulling ahead a teeny bit more with more base damage boost and more item level. So these ones are still the go-to for your own effectiveness. Just be aware they do require being against a single opponent. And in the second and last boss, you have Paranoid Delusions pretty much all the time, along with Tentacles and then Demogorgon aspects. So you could potentially run Celerum there instead. But do note that Void Touch and Zoraxian give you a flat 5% outgoing healing and incoming damage reduction boost on top of more item level and more base damage boost, so they're generally a little bit more effective than Celerum, even if you're not getting a single stack from here. But once again, I hope this clears things up for you guys. Visually, the weapons definitely look a lot different to what we've had in the past, which can be a good thing, but for me they're a little bit too blocky and oddly coloured for my taste. So thanks all for watching, and a special thank you to all these channel members for your extra support. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.